I always thought the sound of laughter was supposed to be warm, the kind that fills a room, that makes you feel like you belong, like you're part of something bigger than yourself. But the laughter I remember from my childhood was sharp, echoing off the kitchen tiles, bouncing around the dinner table, always at my expense. My parents had a way of turning every dream I shared into a punchline, every hope into a joke. I learned early on to keep my ambitions quiet, to tuck them away like loose change in a drawer, only to be counted when no one was watching. The last time I stood in that house, the one with the peeling blue paint and the overgrown hydrangeas, I was 18. I had just told them I was leaving for good. Not for college, not for a job, but for myself. I wanted to see what life looked like when I wasn't the family's favorite target, when I wasn't the one they called the dreamer with a smirk. I remember the way my mother's lips curled, the way my father's eyes sparkled with amusement. "You'll be back," he said, waving his fork in the air like a conductor. "You always come back. This world isn't made for people like you." I wanted to argue, to tell them they were wrong, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I packed my bags in silence, the weight of their laughter pressing down on me with every shirt I folded, every book I tucked away. My little sister Emma watched from the doorway, her eyes wide and uncertain. She was only 12 then, still young enough to believe in fairy tales, still too innocent to understand why I had to go. I hugged her tight, whispered promises I wasn't sure I could keep, and stepped out into the night. The city was nothing like home. It was loud and bright and indifferent, a place where no one knew my name, where no one cared about the stories I carried. I rented a tiny apartment above a bakery, the kind of place that smelled like cinnamon in the mornings and burnt sugar at night. My first job was at a bookstore, shelving novels and sweeping floors, listening to customers talk about lives I could only imagine. I worked late, studied harder, and saved every penny I could. There were nights when the loneliness felt like a second skin, when I wondered if my parents were right, if I was just another dreamer destined to fail. But something inside me refused to give in. Maybe it was stubbornness, maybe it was hope, but I kept going. I enrolled in night classes, learned how to code, how to build things from nothing. I made friends, real friends, people who didn't laugh when I talked about my plans, who cheered when I landed my first freelance gig. I started small, designing websites for local businesses, fixing bugs for startups, always hustling, always learning. The money was slow at first, but it was mine. Every dollar felt like a victory, a tiny rebellion against the voices that told me I'd never make it. Years passed, the city changed, and so did I. I moved into a bigger apartment, one with real windows and a view of the park. I started my own company, a tech consultancy, and watched it grow from a one-person operation to a team of 10. We worked out of a co-working space with exposed brick and too much sunlight, fueled by bad coffee and big ideas. I hired people who reminded me of myself, outsiders, dreamers, the ones who'd been told they'd never make it. Together, we built something real, something that mattered. I didn't talk to my parents much during those years. Our conversations were brief, awkward, filled with the kind of small talk that never really says anything. They asked about the weather, about Emma, about whether I was eating enough. They never asked about my work, never asked if I was happy. I sent Christmas cards, birthday gifts, but I never went back. Not even when Emma called to say she'd made the honor roll, not when my father had his first heart scare. I told myself it was better this way. That distance was the only way to keep from falling back into old patterns. But the past has a way of catching up with you no matter how far you run. It was a Tuesday when the email arrived, buried between invoices and client updates. The subject line was simple: family reunion. My mother's name glared at me from the sender field, her words clipped and formal. "We're having a gathering for Emma's graduation. It would mean a lot if you came. Your father misses you." I stared at the screen for a long time, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to delete it, to pretend I'd never seen it. But another part, the part that still remembered the sting of their laughter, wanted to show them who I'd become. I booked a flight that night, packed a suitcase with clothes I hadn't worn in years, and tried to ignore the knot in my stomach. The drive from the airport to my childhood home felt surreal, the streets both familiar and strange. The house looked smaller than I remembered, the paint more faded, the garden wild and untamed. I parked at the curb, took a deep breath, and walked up the path. The door opened before I could knock. My mother stood in the doorway, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes sharp and assessing. "You came," she said, as if she hadn't expected me to. My father appeared behind her, older, thinner, but still with that same spark in his eyes. "Look who finally decided to visit," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. I forced a smile, stepped inside, and braced myself for whatever came next. The house was filled with people, relatives I barely recognized, neighbors who'd watched me grow up, all gathered to celebrate Emma's graduation. She spotted me from across the room, her face lighting up as she ran to hug me. "I can't believe you're here," she squealed, her arms tight around my waist. For a moment, the years melted away and I was just her big sister again. But the warmth didn't last. My parents hovered nearby, watching, waiting for me to slip up, to say something they could turn into a joke. At dinner, my father raised his glass, his eyes fixed on me. "To Emma, the real success in the family," he said, and the table erupted in laughter. I felt the old shame creeping in, the urge to shrink, to disappear, but I didn't. Not this time. Instead, I smiled, raised my own glass, and said, "To Emma and to everyone who ever dared to dream." The words hung in the air, heavy and electric. For the first time, I saw something flicker in my parents' eyes, something like uncertainty, maybe even respect. The rest of the evening unfolded in a blur of polite conversation and forced smiles. I moved through the rooms like a guest in a stranger's house, nodding at distant cousins, answering the same questions over and over. "What do you do now? Where are you living? Are you seeing anyone?" I gave them the short answers, the ones that didn't invite more questions. I could feel my parents' eyes on me, measuring, weighing, waiting for me to slip up. But I didn't. I'd spent too many years building walls, learning how to keep my secrets safe. After dinner, I found Emma in the backyard, sitting on the old swing set we used to fight over as kids. She looked up as I approached, her eyes shining in the twilight. "I'm glad you came," she said softly, kicking at the dirt with her sneakers. I sat beside her, the metal creaking under our weight. For a moment, we just listened to the cicadas, the distant hum of laughter from inside. "I missed you," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I missed this, even when it hurt." She nodded, her hair falling into her face. "They don't get it, you know, Mom and Dad. They think you left because you were angry, but I know it was more than that." I smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I left because I had to, because I couldn't be who they wanted me to be." She looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the understanding in her eyes. "I want to be like you," she said. "Brave." The word caught me off guard. Brave. I'd never thought of myself that way. I'd always felt like I was running, escaping, surviving. But maybe that was its own kind of courage. I squeezed her hand, feeling the old bond between us, stronger than ever. I told her, "You already are. You just don't know it yet." Inside, the party was winding down. My parents were in the kitchen, clearing plates, their voices low and tense. I hovered in the doorway, unsure whether to step in or slip away. My mother glanced up, her expression unreadable. "You're leaving already?" she asked, her tone sharp. "I have an early flight," I lied. "Work's busy." She snorted, stacking dishes with more force than necessary. "Always work. You never have time for family." I bit back a retort, the old arguments rising in my throat. Instead, I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I make time for the people who make time for me." I said quietly. My father looked up, his eyes narrowing. You think you're better than us now, just because you live in the city, have some fancy job? I shook my head, exhaustion settling in my bones. No, Dad. I just want to be happy. Isn't that what you always said you wanted for me? He didn't answer. My mother busied herself with the dishes, her back to me. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. I turned to leave, but my father's voice stopped me. You'll come back, he said, not a question, but a statement. I paused in the hallway, my hand on the banister. Maybe, I said, but not for the reasons you think. I left before they could respond, the screen door slamming behind me. The night air was cool, the sky clear and endless. I walked to my car, my heart pounding, my mind racing. I'd faced them, stood my ground, but it didn't feel like victory. Not yet. The flight home was quiet, the city lights twinkling below as the plane descended. I unlocked my apartment, the familiar scent of coffee and old books greeting me. I dropped my bag by the door, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed onto the couch. For the first time in years, I let myself cry. Not out of sadness, but relief. I'd survived. I'd gone back, faced the ghosts, and come out the other side. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Work picked up, new clients, new projects, new challenges. My team was growing, our reputation spreading. We landed a contract with a major tech firm, the kind of deal that could change everything. I threw myself into the work, losing track of time, of meals, of sleep. But beneath the exhaustion was a sense of pride, of accomplishment. I was building something real, something lasting. One afternoon, as I was reviewing proposals in the office, my phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? There was a pause, then a familiar voice, hesitant and small. It's Mom. I sat up straighter, my heart thudding in my chest. Hi. Another pause. I wanted to say I'm sorry for the other night, for everything. The words sounded foreign in her mouth, awkward and uncertain. I waited, unsure what to say. I know we haven't always understood each other, she continued, her voice trembling. But I saw you with Emma. I saw how happy she was, and I realized maybe we were wrong. Maybe we didn't give you enough credit. I closed my eyes, the weight of years pressing down on me. Thank you, I whispered. That means a lot. She cleared her throat, the old defensiveness creeping back in. Your father, he's stubborn, you know how he is, but he misses you. We both do. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I miss you too, sometimes. The silence stretched between us, not as heavy as before, but still there. Maybe you could come home for Thanksgiving, she offered. Just for a few days, no pressure. I thought about it, about the house with the peeling paint, the laughter that cut like knives. But I also thought about Emma, about the swing set, about the possibility of something new. Maybe, I said. We'll see. We said our goodbyes, the conversation ending with more hope than it started. That night, I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker. I thought about all the times I'd wanted to give up, all the times I'd doubted myself. I thought about my parents, about the way they'd laughed when I said I'd never return. And I realized something important. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their laughter to define me. I was enough, just as I was. The next few weeks flew by. My company hit new milestones, our client list growing, our team expanding. I was invited to speak at a tech conference to share my story with other young entrepreneurs. Standing on that stage, looking out at the sea of faces, I felt a surge of pride. I talked about failure, about resilience, about the power of believing in yourself when no one else does. I saw heads nodding, eyes shining, people scribbling notes. For the first time, I felt seen. not as the family's joke, but as someone worth listening to. After the conference, I received dozens of messages from attendees, thanking me for my honesty, for my courage. One message stood out, a young woman named Priya, who wrote, "Your story made me believe I can do it too. Thank you for showing me it's possible." I smiled, tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. This was why I did it. Not for the money, not for the recognition, but for the chance to make a difference. The seasons shifted, and with them, so did my life. Autumn painted the city in gold and crimson, the air crisp and full of promise. My days were a blur of meetings, brainstorming sessions, and late-night coding sprints. My team became my second family, people who celebrated every win, no matter how small, and picked each other up after every setback. We worked hard, laughed harder, and built something that felt bigger than any one of us. But even as my world expanded, the past tugged at me. Emma called often, her voice bright and full of stories. She told me about her classes, her friends, her dreams of studying abroad. She asked for advice, for help with essays, for reassurance that she was on the right path. I gave her everything I could, my time, my encouragement, my belief in her. She was the best part of home, the thread that kept me tethered to a place I'd tried so hard to leave behind. Thanksgiving approached, and with it, the invitation I'd been dreading. My mother called again, her tone softer this time, almost pleading. "It would mean a lot if you came. Emma keeps asking about you. Your father, he's not getting any younger." I hesitated, the old wounds aching, but Emma's voice echoed in my mind. Her laughter, her hope. I agreed, promising myself I'd keep my expectations low. The drive back was different this time. I wasn't running away. I was choosing to return, on my own terms. The house looked the same, faded paint, wild garden, the swing set still creaking in the wind. But I was different. I walked up the path with my head held high, my heart steady. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of roasting turkey and cinnamon. Emma met me at the door, her arms flung around my neck. "You came!" she cried, her joy infectious. My parents hovered in the background, uncertain, awkward. My father cleared his throat, his eyes darting away. "Glad you could make it," he muttered, his voice gruff. Dinner was a strange dance of old habits and new boundaries. My mother fussed over the food, my father grumbled about the football game, Emma chattered about school. I listened, contributed, but didn't let myself get pulled into the old patterns. When my father made a snide comment about city folks and fancy jobs, I smiled and let it slide. When my mother asked if I was seeing anyone, I answered honestly, without shame or apology. After dinner, Emma and I escaped to the backyard, the stars bright above us. She leaned against my shoulder, her voice soft. "I'm glad you're here," she said. "It feels right." I squeezed her hand, grateful for her presence, for her unwavering support. The next morning, I woke early, the house still quiet. I made coffee, savoring the silence. My father joined me, his footsteps heavy on the linoleum. He poured himself a cup, sat across from me, and stared into the steam. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, he cleared his throat. "You've done well for yourself," he said, his voice low. "Better than I expected." I looked at him, searching for the sarcasm, the bite, but it wasn't there. Just a tired man, trying to bridge a gap he'd helped create. "Thanks, Dad," I said, my voice gentle. "It wasn't easy." He nodded, his eyes fixed on the table. "I know we gave you a hard time, your mother and I. We didn't understand. We thought we were protecting you, keeping you from disappointment. But maybe we just held you back." I swallowed, the old hurt rising. I needed to leave. I needed to find out who I was, without all the noise. He nodded again, his shoulders slumping. "I get that now. I just wish it hadn't taken so long." We sat in silence, the weight of unspoken apologies hanging between us. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The rest of the weekend passed in a blur of small moments. Emma showing me her college applications, my mother asking for help with the computer, my father fixing the leaky faucet. It was ordinary, mundane, but it felt different. There was a softness, a tentative hope, as if we were all trying to rewrite the story. When it was time to leave, Emma hugged me tight, her eyes shining. "Promise you'll visit again?" she asked. I smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. "I promise." My parents stood on the porch, watching as I loaded my bags into the car. My mother stepped forward, her hands twisting in her apron. She said, "Take care of yourself," her voice trembling. My father nodded, his eyes meeting mine. "We're proud of you," he said, the words awkward but sincere. I drove away, the house shrinking in the rearview mirror. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was escaping. I felt like I was moving forward, carrying the best parts of home with me. Back in the city, life picked up where it left off. My company landed another big client. Our team celebrated with pizza and cheap champagne. I was invited to join a mentorship program, helping young women break into tech. I accepted, eager to give back, to be the person I'd needed when I was starting out. One evening, as I was leaving the office, my phone buzzed. A message from my father. "Saw your interview on TV. You looked happy. Proud of you." I stared at the screen, a smile spreading across my face. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The months passed, each one bringing new challenges, new victories. I traveled for work, spoke at conferences, mentored students. I built a life I was proud of, a life that was mine. And slowly, my relationship with my parents began to heal. We talked more, laughed more, found common ground in unexpected places. But the real test came one spring afternoon when my phone rang and my mother's voice trembled on the other end. "Your father lost his job," she said, her words rushed and panicked. "We're struggling. We don't know what to do." For a moment, I was that scared 18-year-old again, standing in the kitchen as they laughed at my dreams. But then I remembered who I was now, strong, capable, resilient. I took a deep breath, steadied my voice. "I can help," I said. "Let's figure this out together." Helping my parents wasn't about proving anything anymore. It wasn't about showing them I'd made it or rubbing my success in their faces. It was about family, about compassion, about breaking the cycle of pride and silence that had kept us apart for so long. I listened as my mother explained the situation. My father's company had downsized, the severance was barely enough to cover a few months of bills, and the job market in our small town was bleak. She sounded smaller than I'd ever heard her, the confidence and sharpness gone, replaced by worry and uncertainty. I asked questions, practical ones, the kind they learned to ask in business meetings and client calls. What were their monthly expenses? Did they have any savings? What about health insurance, mortgage, debts? My mother answered each one, her voice growing steadier as she realized I wasn't judging, just trying to help. I offered to review their finances, to help them create a budget, to look for resources and support. I even suggested they consider moving closer to the city where opportunities were better. For the first time, she didn't dismiss my ideas. She listened. My father was more reluctant. He'd always been proud, the kind of man who believed in fixing things himself, who saw asking for help as a weakness. But when I called him that evening, he didn't argue. He just sighed, the sound heavy with years of carrying burdens alone. He admitted, "I never thought I'd be the one needing help from my kid, but I'm glad you're here." I told him it was okay, that everyone needs help sometimes, that it didn't make him any less of a father. He was quiet for a long time, then said, "Thank you." 2 words, simple and honest, but they meant everything. Over the next few weeks, I helped them navigate unemployment forms, update resumes, and apply for jobs.
I connected my father with a friend in the city who ran a small construction company. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady work, and it gave him a sense of purpose. My mother started volunteering at a local library, rediscovering her love for books and community. They downsized to a smaller house, closer to Emma's college, and for the first time in years, they seemed lighter, freer. Emma thrived in her new environment. She called me every week, sharing stories about her classes, her friends, her plans for the future. She told me how proud she was of our family, how grateful she was that we'd found our way back to each other. I told her I was proud of her too, that she was the glue that held us all together. As for me, life continued to unfold in ways I never expected. My company grew, our reputation spreading beyond the city. We launched new projects, partnered with organizations that shared our values, and made a real impact in the community. I was invited to join the board of a nonprofit, to mentor young women from underprivileged backgrounds, to speak at events about resilience and reinvention. Each opportunity felt like a new chapter, a chance to give back, to pay forward the kindness and support I'd received along the way.
One evening, as I sat in my apartment, watching the city lights flicker, I thought about how far I'd come. I remembered the laughter that once haunted me, the doubts that had threatened to drown me. I remembered the night I left home, the fear and hope tangled together in my chest, and I realized that every step, every struggle, had led me here, to a life I'd built on my own terms, surrounded by people who believed in me. My parents visited the city that summer, their first time seeing my world up close. I took them to my office, introduced them to my team, showed them the projects we were working on. My father walked through the open plan workspace, his eyes wide with wonder. "You did all this?" he asked, his voice full of awe. I nodded, pride swelling in my chest. "With a lot of help," I said, gesturing to my team. "No one does it alone." We had dinner at my favorite restaurant, a cozy place with exposed brick and twinkling lights. My mother asked questions about my work, genuinely curious for the first time. My father listened, nodding, occasionally offering a story from his own days on the job site. Emma joined us, her laughter bright and infectious, weaving us all together. For the first time, we felt like a family. Not perfect, not without scars, but real. As the evening wound down, my father raised his glass, his eyes shining. "To second chances," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "and to never giving up on each other." We clinked glasses, the sound ringing out like a promise. Later, as we walked back to my apartment, my mother slipped her arm through mine. "I'm proud of you," she whispered, "not just for what you've accomplished, but for who you are, for coming back, even when we didn't deserve it." I squeezed her hand, tears stinging my eyes. I came back because I wanted to, not because I had to. That's the difference. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the journey, the pain, the growth, the forgiveness. I thought about the power of choosing your own path, of refusing to let anyone else define your worth. I thought about the laughter that once hurt and how it no longer had power over me. In the end, it wasn't about proving my parents wrong. It was about proving to myself that I was enough, that I could build a life worth living, that I could love and be loved in return. It was about finding peace not in their approval, but in my own heart. If you're listening to this, if you've ever felt like the joke in your own family, if you've ever been told your dreams are too big, too wild, too impossible, know this: you are not alone. You are stronger than you think, braver than you believe, and more capable than anyone ever gave you credit for. The world is full of people who will try to shrink you, to laugh at your ambitions, to tell you that you'll never make it. But you get to decide who you become. You get to write your own story. My parents laughed when I said I'd never return, but when they saw the life I'd built, the person I'd become, they didn't just welcome me back, they begged me to stay. Not because they needed me, but because they finally saw me. And that, more than anything, is the victory I never knew I needed.
So here's to the dreamers, the outsiders, the ones who refuse to give up. Here's to second chances, to forgiveness, to building something beautiful out of broken pieces. Here's to coming home, not to the place you left, but to the person you've become.